Neil Katyal, who used to be, I think he was acting Solicitor General under Obama, perhaps, and Sam Koppelman, they both put together a piece in the New York Times yesterday about why Congress should impeach Trump again. Before I get into it, do you remember what Adam Schiff, who is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee that brought the impeachment charges against this filthy pig, remember what he said? He said that the failure of the Senate to convict Trump on obvious impeachable offenses would result in his doing it again, which he has done. He did it the other day, Saturday, when he tried to persuade the Secretary of State of Georgia, to join him, Donald Trump, in election fraud, work with Donald Trump, join Donald Trump in committing serious felonies. Trump has done this all his life because there's never been any punishment for this filthy subhuman. There's never been any punishment whatsoever. And the 4 years that he's been president, this is what Adam Schiff warned about. Trump has repeatedly violated the law, has repeatedly pissed all over the Constitution, has repeatedly given the middle finger to whatever justice still exists in this country, over and over and over again. And he's done it with impunity, and he's done it with the assistance and the codependency, as well as the enabling, sounds like an addict, doesn't he, of what used to be the Republican Party in this country, which is now the Christian Fascist Party. So why should Congress impeach Trump again? This filthy bastard only has 2 weeks left in office, during which time, of course, he can and will do considerable damage. There will be bloodshed. There will be violence. The thugs, the brown shirts, the piss boys are all gathering. The cucumbers, they're gathering in Washington, D.C., even as we speak, at Trump's invitation to commit violence. Trump should be arrested, tried, convicted, and punished. And the punishment for treason in this country is fairly severe, isn't it? No, I'm serious. That's what Trump is committing, purely and simply. This is a coup attempt. This is exactly what the filthy, slaveholding bastards did in this country in 1861. Same thing, only much worse. Much worse then. Same thing now, in the sense that what Trump is trying to do is forever end constitutional government in this country. I've said this for 4 years. I don't understand why we've allowed it to go this far. I honestly don't. Neil Katyal and Sam Koppelman write this: the emergence of an audio recording of Trump pressuring the Georgia Secretary of State to overturn the results of the election is a harrowing moment in the history of our democracy. And though the number of his days in office is dwindling, the only appropriate response is to impeach Mr. Trump again. Whether he acknowledges it or not, Trump is leaving the White House on January 20th. But right now, there's nothing stopping him from running in 2024. That is a terrifying prospect, because the way he has conducted himself over the past 2 months, wielding the power of the presidency to try to steal another term in office, has threatened one of our republic's most essential traditions, the peaceful transfer of power. Fortunately, our founders anticipated we would face a moment like this, which is one reason Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution entrusts Congress with the power not only to remove a president, but also to prevent him or her from ever holding elected office again. Mr. Trump's conduct over the past 2 months has left our legislators with no choice but to use it. That impeachment inquiry would take time, far more than Mr. Trump has left in office, but it would be well worth it. Since the election was called in favor of President-elect Joe Biden, Trump has been relentlessly fomenting doubts about its legitimacy, even as many federal and state courts, including ones whose judges were appointed by Trump himself, have ruled against his claims. He has reportedly inquired about the idea of enlisting the help of the military to keep him in power. Most recently, on the phone with Georgia's Secretary of State, he said, quote, "I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have. We won this state," even though he didn't. In a democracy, you don't find votes, you count them. Most strikingly, Trump threatened the Georgia officials with criminal prosecution if they didn't comply, saying leaving the vote counts intact would be, his words, a big risk. This kind of threat may sound familiar because an eerily similar abuse of power led to Mr. Trump's impeachment just over a year ago. Senator Susan Collins of Maine explained her vote to acquit him by saying she thought he had learned, quote, a pretty big lesson, end quote. Clearly, Mr. Trump learned a different lesson, that he was above the law. It's just as William Davey from North Carolina, discussing the position of the presidency at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, predicted. He said, a president who viewed himself to be unimpeachable, and this was said in 1787, would, quote, spare no efforts or means whatever to get himself reelected, end quote. It's time for Congress once and for all to put an end to this. No one wants to put the country through the turmoil of another impeachment, but we also can't afford to look the other way for several reasons. For one, we must establish a precedent that a president who takes or who tries to cheat his way to reelection will be held accountable. Sure, this attempt may not have succeeded, but a failed coup should itself be alarming enough. And who is to say there won't be a closer election in the future with a more competent authoritarian candidate whose party also has control of the House of Representatives? We need to make sure that Congress has ensured that candidates cannot strong-arm their way into reelection. We also need to set a precedent that a lame duck president can still be held accountable. If an incumbent, say, threatened to nuke Iran unless the Electoral College sided with him, we would want to have a mechanism by which we could remove him from office. In our Constitution, impeachment is that mechanism, but it is worthless if we do not use it. And last, we cannot risk Mr. Trump's becoming president again, or for that matter, even running again with a chance of winning. This isn't a point about ideology. It's a reflection of the fact that our system may not be able to withstand this lawless man returning to the highest office in the land. Emboldened by our failure to hold him accountable for abusing his power in his first term, who knows what he would do in a non-consecutive second term? The damage to our institutions from his first 4 years in office will take generations to undo. Our democracy might not be able to handle another 4. Senator Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, was able to protect Mr. Trump the last time, no doubt because McConnell was afraid of what a truly rigorous trial might show. But he may no longer be able to do so. For one thing, Trump will soon lack the power of the presidency to dole out favors and punish his enemies. For another, the Senate composition will be different. Already, Democrats have flipped seats in Arizona and Colorado. Republicans who voted to acquit him, like Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, have shown signs they are finally willing to stand up to him. And Georgians will go to the polls to decide who will represent them in the Senate. Mr. Trump's preferred senators, Loeffler and Perdue, would no doubt try to block an inquiry into his misdeeds. But if these senators lose their seats, A full and robust inquiry in the Senate could be the result, with Chuck Schumer as majority leader. In 2008, a young member of the Senate Judiciary Committee said, quote, "The business of high crimes and misdemeanors goes to the question of whether or not the person serving as President of the United States put their own interests, their personal interests, ahead of public service." End quote. That congressman's name was Mike Pence, and he was exactly right. We need to convict Trump to make sure he can never call the White House home again. Neil Katyal, an associate, writing that in the New York Times. The pressure is on Mike Pence right now. Trump, because he is an ignorant piece of human waste, Trump is making the statements repeatedly today through his filthy Twitter feed, through his corrupt, filthy Twitter feed, that Mike Pence, and Trump is saying more or less, Mike Pence better come through and declare that the Electoral College votes are invalid. I don't know what Trump is proposing he's going to do to Mike Pence if Mike Pence does not violate his oath of office. But that's the thing about Trump. He doesn't really, it's kind of like a mob boss. He doesn't really say what he's going to do if the person to whom he's directing his threats doesn't comply. I guess without realizing he's doing it, what Trump is saying is that the victim's imagination is far greater than the orange bastard's vocabulary. So the orange bastard leaves it up to the proposed victim to decide or to worry about what the retribution might be coming from the orange ape. Pence has done nothing but stare at Donald Trump for 4 years in the same way that Nancy Reagan used to stare at Ronald Reagan. Big difference, of course, Nancy Reagan was married to Ronald Reagan. Donald Trump is simply, or I should say Mike Pence is simply Donald Trump's lapdog. Or butt boy, take your pick, it doesn't matter to me. Pence is the type of coward and Christian fascist that Donald Trump absolutely knew he would own once Pence was made vice president. Trump knew from the beginning, I will own this little fucker no matter what I do, he's mine. And it turned out that way. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.